Professor Zixithara adjusted her bioluminescent throat sac as she surveyed the packed amphitheater. Students from across the Galactic Federation had gathered for her renowned xenobiology lecture series, and today's topic was particularly crucial: identifying and avoiding the galaxy's most dangerous predatory species. Today, she began, her voice resonating through the translation matrices, we examine the apex predators that have shaped evolutionary fear responses across 17 different star systems. The holographic display materialized above the stage, showing a massive, scaled creature with razor-sharp claws, the Kethamori Deathstalker from Proxima 7. Notice the distinctive hunting posture, head lowered, muscles coiled. This stance triggers immediate flight responses in 93% of sentient species. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. A crystalline student in the front row dimmed nervously, while several aquatic delegates instinctively moved away from the projection. The key indicator, Professor Zixithara continued, is the facial configuration during hunting mode. Observe the narrowed sensory organs, the exposed dental structures, the aggressive muscle tension around the cranial region. She gestured with one of her 4 manipulator arms. These features have been consistent across every apex predator we've cataloged. The facial expression of a hunting predator is universally recognizable and universally terrifying. The next slide showed a pack of void runners, their sleek forms captured mid-hunt. Then came the shadow maws of the outer rim, their multiple jaws unhinged in preparation for feeding. Each image drew collective gasps and fearful chittering from the assembled students. Now, the professor said, her academic excitement building, we come to the most recently discovered apex predator, a species so perfectly evolved for hunting that they've conquered their entire planet and are now expanding into space. The amphitheater fell silent. Even the ambient hum of the environmental systems seemed to fade. I present to you, she announced dramatically, the humans of Sol 3. The hologram shifted to display a bipedal figure, unremarkable at first glance. No claws, no visible natural weapons, no intimidating size. Several students exchanged confused looks. I know what you're thinking, Professor Zixithara said with a knowing gesture. They appear relatively harmless. But observe their hunting statistics. They've driven countless species to extinction on their homeworld. They've mastered fire and tool use, and most remarkably, they hunt in coordinated packs while maintaining complex social hierarchies. She clicked to the next image, a human face in what she believed was hunting mode. Notice the predatory facial configuration, the way they bare their dental structures, the way the facial muscles contract, the intense focus of their binocular vision. This expression, which they call a smile, is particularly terrifying when... Excuse me, Professor? The voice came from the back of the amphitheater. Every head turned to see a figure standing up, bipedal, wearing the blue uniform of the Federation's cultural exchange program. A human. Professor Zixithara's throat sac paled to a sickly green. Yes? The human began walking down the steps, and something extraordinary happened. As she moved, her facial features shifted into the exact configuration displayed on the hologram. She was smiling. The effect was immediate and devastating. The crystalline students went completely dark. The aquatic delegates began rapidly filtering water through their panic gills. A group of avian exchange students took flight, despite the indoor setting. I'm Sarah Chen from the Terran Embassy, the human said, her smile somehow growing wider as she spoke. I couldn't help but notice you're discussing my species. Professor Zixithara backed away from the podium, her normally composed academic demeanor crumbling. Please, she whispered. We meant no offense. This is purely educational. Oh, I'm not offended, Sarah said, and the warmth in her voice somehow made her smile even more terrifying to the watching aliens. But I think there might be a small misunderstanding about human facial expressions. She reached the front of the amphitheater, and Professor Zixithara noticed something that contradicted everything in her research. The human's body language was completely relaxed. No coiled muscles, no hunting posture, no signs of predatory aggression. You see? Sarah continued, addressing the now half-empty amphitheater. Several species had evacuated entirely. What you call our hunting expression is actually how we show friendliness and happiness. The professor's academic mind struggled to process this information. But the dental display, the muscle contractions, We smile when we're happy, when we meet friends, when we're trying to be welcoming. Sarah's expression softened slightly. I'm smiling now because I think this is a fascinating cross-cultural learning opportunity. Professor Zix-Thera looked from Sarah to her holographic display and back again. Slowly, pieces began falling into place. Then, when you're actually hunting, we tend to be very quiet and focused. No expressions at all, really. Sarah paused thoughtfully. Though I should mention, most of us don't hunt anymore. We've moved on to agriculture and food synthesizers. The irony was not lost on the professor. Here she was, a renowned expert on predatory species, cowering before a human who was trying to be friendly. The very expression she'd identified as marking humans as apex predators was, in fact, their way of showing peace. I don't suppose, Sarah said, her smile taking on a slightly mischievous quality, you'd like me to give a guest lecture on actual human behavior? I think there might be quite a few misconceptions to clear up. Professor Zix-Thera looked around at her depleted classroom, then back at the remarkably patient human. Despite everything, she found herself intrigued by the research possibilities. That, she said slowly, would be most educational. Sarah's smile grew brighter, and this time, Professor Zix-Thera tried to see it not as a predator's threat display, but as a genuine expression of joy. It was, she had to admit, rather pleasant once you knew what it meant. Though she made a mental note to warn the remaining students about this revelation. The crystalline delegation might need therapy.